Emmerdale tease that the Sleepy Valley is about to be shaken by the arrival of a man whose eyes hold secrets deeper than any moorland pool. In the gloaming light of a late summer evening, the narrow lanes that wind between stone cottages and hedgerows seemed to whisper of change. And change arrived at the door of the Woolpack, where Kev stepped down from the dust-covered van that bore his name in peeling letters. His broad shoulders were hunched against the breeze, his fists clenched and unclenched as if wrestling unseen chains. Kev's first glimpse of the village was through a haze of nostalgia and suspicion. He inhaled the familiar scent of wood smoke and damp earth, and felt a pang of something he hadn't named for years, regret, or perhaps anticipation. Behind him, the van door closed with a muted thud, sealing away whatever he had left behind on the road. Ahead lay the heart of the community he'd once known, and the person he'd come back to find. Word spread quickly. By sunrise, gossip was already buzzing in the corners of the cafe and at the bus stop. Who was this stranger? What business could he have with Robert Sugden, that brooding figure who carried his own shadows? Or with Mackenzie Boyd and Aaron Dingle, the unlikely pair whose recent scandals had captivated half the valley. Some theorized a shared past in cold prison cells, others speculated a blood tie to Lewis Barton, the young farmer, whose father had vanished under suspicious circumstances. Robert was first to cross paths with Kev. He emerged from the office at Home Farm, flipping a cigarette between his fingers, when he noticed the new face leaning against a fence post. Kev's expression was unreadable, though his gaze lingered too long on Robert's stooped shoulders. "You must be Robert," Kev said, voice low but carrying across the yard. Robert stiffened, the cigarette dropping from his lips. "And you are?" "Someone who knew you when the nights were longer and the risks were greater." Kev offered a half-smile that didn't reach his eyes. Robert raised an eyebrow. "You've got me at a disadvantage. No one's called me that in a long time." Under the skin, Robert felt a flicker of alarm. Prison monikers rarely surfaced without reason. Across the village, at the barn-turned cafe, Mackenzie and Aaron sat over mugs of steaming coffee when Charity burst in, cheeks flushed. "You too, quick," she hissed. "Outside, now." The pair followed as Charity led them to the courtyard, where Kev leaned against the wall as if he'd been waiting. "I'm looking for you," Kev told them, stepping forward. Mackenzie's heart hammered. "Me?" he said, voice catching. "Why would you be looking for me?" Aaron's gaze swept to Charity, then back to the newcomer. "What's this about?" Kev's smile flickered into something like sorrow. "You were there the night it all went wrong. You saw things you shouldn't have seen, and you ran." His words cut through the chill morning air. Mackenzie's face whitened. Aaron's jaw clenched. Charity's hand flew to her mouth. Meanwhile, in a quiet corner of the village, John McBain paced in his rented flat, the walls lined with clippings and maps. His mind was alight with paranoia. Ever since that masked phone call warning him, he had felt hunted. When he learned that Kev had returned, a silent dread filled him. Who was this man? And how much did he know of John's darkest propensities? That afternoon, as John eased into the Woolpack under the pretense of grabbing a pint, he spotted Kev at the end of the bar, chatting casually with the new landlord. John's throat tightened. He sidled over, forcing a grin. "Do I know you?" he asked, voice friendly. Kev turned, eyeing John with a dispassionate appraisal. "I don't think so," he said softly. "But I've heard of you." John's pulse raced. "All good things, I hope," he joked, but Kev's expression hardened. "Depends on who you ask." John's laughter died in his throat. He backed away, feeling the first prickle of true fear in weeks. As evening fell, Laura Shaw, Emmerdale's proprietress of drama and goodwill, stood outside the village hall, greeting neighbors as they arrived for the harvest fundraiser. Her eyes flicked to Kev leaning against the corner lamppost, arms folded. When he caught her gaze, she raised a hand in welcome and then lowered it, unsure. Later, Laura would tell anyone who asked that Chris Corkill, who played Kev, was a stroke of luck for their tight-knit ensemble. His link to someone we all know, Laura would say in interviews, and his entrance will shatter more than a few peaceful nights. Inside the hall, the buzz of conversation stuttered to silence as Laura took the makeshift stage. "Welcome, everyone," she began, voice bright. Soft smiles rippled through the crowd, until Kev stepped forward beside her, tilting his head to address the gathering. The spotlight picked out the lines in his face, the quiet menace in his stance. "I've come back," he announced, voice carrying into every corner, "to find the man who betrayed me." Gasps echoed. Robert's eyes darted to the exit. Mackenzie gripped Aaron's arm. Charity's hand flew to her mouth. John's pulse thundered in his ears. Only Lewis Barton, standing at the back, folded his arms and studied Kev with keen curiosity. Had his own past woven a secret connection to this stranger? Kev's gaze swept the room, pinning each listener in turn. "Some of you helped them," he said, pointing first at Robert, then Mackenzie and Aaron, then John. "Some of you turned a blind eye." His finger paused on Lewis. "And some of you have no idea what you're hiding." The lights flickered, whether by accident or design, no one could tell, and in the dimness, the villagers felt the full weight of Kev's presence. A promise of reckoning hung in the air, as potent and dangerous as the scent of rain on parched earth. That night, as the hall emptied and the guests dispersed into the mist-shrouded lanes, Robert and Mackenzie found themselves side by side outside the Woolpack's doors. Neither spoke at first. Finally, Robert exhaled, voice rough. "So he really knows." Mackenzie pressed a hand to his forehead. "Knows what?" "Knows me. Knows you. Knows John." Behind them, the pub's warmth spilled into the night, but neither man felt safe enough to return. On the far edge of the green, Aaron and Charity conferred in hushed tones, mapping out every moment they'd seen Kev in the weeks before, and each memory only deepened the puzzle. In the distance, Lewis Barton watched through a frosted window at Butler's farm, his silhouette half-lit by the lamplight. He pressed a finger to the glass, recalling his own absent father and the rumors that had swirled when he was a boy. Could Kev be the man he'd never known? And somewhere, in the silent corridors of the empty courthouse, John McBain ran hot fingers down the file where his name was scrawled alongside a date months old, the date when a body had turned up and a loose end had been presumed tied. John's breath caught, as he realized the game was far from over. Morning brought no relief. The mist clung to every branch and fence, and villagers emerged with anxious glances. At home farm, Robert lingered over his coffee, staring into the swirls of cream. He felt exposed, naked in his memories. At the cafe, Mackenzie tried to laugh with Aaron, but each burst of mirth felt false. Across the valley, Kiara admitted she'd seen Kev driving by, headlights off, at dawn. Was he staking out his targets? As the day wore on, Kev moved through the village like a calm storm, quietly observing, gently interrogating, slipping into conversations, as though he belonged. He asked Robert about a business connection that no longer existed. He cornered Mackenzie by the livery yard and inquired after Aaron's recent legal troubles. He stepped into the margins of John's path, so that every time John unlocked his flat door, he half expected to see Kev's shadow lurking beyond. By evening, Woolpack regulars sat on edge. The laughter that once rang out over pints felt brittle. Even the children playing in the yard paused as Kev passed, their games momentarily forgotten. What was he seeking, and would he find it before the valley tore itself apart? As darkness fell, a single text message lit up Robert's phone, "Meet me where it started." Midnight. No sender. Robert's thumb hovered over the screen, heart pounding. Below, a second message arrived on Mackenzie's phone. You know what you did. Come alone. Across the village, Aaron's phone chimed with a third unknown text. You can't hide from the truth. And somewhere in the twilight, John McBain's own phone buzzed with a fourth. The final piece is in your hands. The clock ticked toward midnight, and Emmerdale held its breath. Everyone knew that when Kev's questions turned to accusations, no one would be spared, and the sins of the past would claw their way into the light. Under a sky spun from ink and dotted with distant pinpricks of starlight, Emmerdale's quiet lanes lay under a tense hush. The strange summons Kev had delivered to Robert, Mackenzie, Aaron, and John, each in cryptic midnight messages, hung in the air like a guillotine's blade. None could sleep, and by dusk they found themselves drawn, one by one, toward the ruined old barn on the outskirts of the village, the place where their intertwined past had begun and where Kev promised to reveal the truths they had spent years burying. Robert Sugden was the first to arrive. His boots crunched on frosted grass as he approached the collapsed doorway. Inside, half-collapsed rafters framed pools of pale moonlight. Every step he took echoed like a heartbeat, reminding him of the secrets he'd sealed when he'd walked away from these ruins 7 years ago. He paused at the entrance, noting the silhouette leaning against a beam. Kev, his features half lost in shadow, arms folded. Late, Sugden, Kev murmured without turning. His voice carried an edge of accusation. Robert's stomach twisted. How many nights had he lain in his own bed, hearing that nickname whispered in his mind? I came, Robert said at last. What do you want? Kev struck a match and held it to a battered tin lantern. When the flame leapt to life, it cast flickering light on the scars across Kev's knuckles and the haunted hollows beneath his cheekbones. I want answers, he said. Not excuses. Robert swallowed. I owe you nothing. Kev's eyes bored into him. You owe me everything. Before Robert could respond, muffled footsteps drifted through the broken wall. Mackenzie Boyd slipped inside, lured by his text. You know what you did. Come alone. He found Robert and Kev locked in a silent standoff. Aaron Dingle followed next, stooping to avoid a fallen rafter, his heart pounding as he recognized the faces in the dim glow. The barn held its breath as the three men formed a tense semicircle around Kev. The air smelled of damp straw and old blood, memories of that long-ago night when betrayal had set them on their separate paths. Aaron's throat went dry. He had tried to forget that night, to rebuild a life with Mackenzie, to banish the guilt that had clung like adhesive to his skin. But now Kev stood before them, proof that the past never truly dies. Where's John? Mackenzie demanded. He got a text too. A scraping sound from the shadows answered him as John McBain emerged, hands shoved deep into his coat pockets, face pale but determined. He glanced at each man in turn, taking measure of the stakes. You called me here, John said, voice taut. This better not be some prank. Kev let the lantern dangle from his fingertips. You all deserve to hear it, he said. Everything I've pieced together about our lives, and about the blood that ties us to this valley. He paused, eyes sweeping over Robert's tense form, Mackenzie's clenched jaw, Aaron's trembling fists, and John's rigid posture. Finally he spoke the word they all feared, murder. 2 years earlier, a body had been discovered in the stream at Butler's farm, the victim of a crime that had never been solved. Whispers had named the wrong culprit. Grief-stricken families had received no justice. Over time, the investigation had stalled, and the village moved on. Robert had returned to home farm, Mackenzie and Aaron had built a life together. John had turned detective in neighboring Hot 10, and then drifted back, weary. Yet Kev had returned with a purpose, to unearth the identity of that silent driftwood corpse, and to confront those he believed responsible. You think one of us killed him? Robert challenged. Kev's eyes flickered. I think one of you knows what happened. He struck the lantern with a rock, and its light sputtered. Let me start at the beginning. 2 decades ago, I was a boy living in Orton. My father, a petty criminal, ran with a gang that preyed on travelers and farmhands. I helped when I was old enough. But one night, our leader crossed a line. He killed a drifter named Adam Barton for sport. Kev's jaw clenched at the name. They dumped the body in the river here, thinking it would wash away. Only it lingered. Mackenzie's face blanched. Adam Barton, that was Lewis's father. Aaron's breath hitched. You knew, he whispered. Kev nodded. I was there. I saw it all. And back then I was too scared to speak. I ran away, and I've spent every day since trying to put the pieces together. John's hand went to the lantern's metal rail, tapping nervously. Why come now? Because Lewis Barton is going to find out, if I don't do something. Kev's eyes glittered. Lewis contacted me last month, after he found the coroner's notes in the archives. He wants the truth. At that, Robert felt the weight of that name settle like gravel in his gut. Lewis Barton, the gentle young man who tilled the soil at Butler's farm, whose quiet smiles had gone on without a father's guiding hand, was seeking answers. Aaron stepped forward. Where is he now? He asked. Why didn't he come himself? Kev shook his head. He's afraid of what the truth will do to the people who raised him. He asked me to come in his place. A cold wind stuttered through the barn, stirring loose hay. Mackenzie folded his arms. So you dragged all of us here to confess? No, Kev said gently. I came to witness your responses. He took a battered envelope from his jacket and tossed it onto a wooden crate. Inside are statements I collected from witnesses who've long since moved on. Neighbors who heard shouting that night. A scrap of a newspaper clipping tying the gang to Robert's father, who trafficked stolen goods at home farm. He swept the lantern to cast the crate's contents in stark relief. I've also got Diane Dingle's testimony. She saw Aaron near the riverbank that night, arguing with someone she thought was a stranger. John sucked in a breath. That can't be right. But it is, Kev continued. I've followed the leads to each of you, because you have pieces of the puzzle. Robert, your alibi collapsed when I found the courier's log showing your car at the track that night. Mackenzie, witnesses saw you and Aaron near the river after sunset. Aaron, you ran when Diane called for help. And John, your silence as a detective, you buried the initial file. Silence swallowed the barn. None moved. Each man turned the accusation over in his mind. The river, the body, the hush that had fallen over every investigation, it all converged here. Robert's knuckles whitened on his jacket. This is a smear job. My father was a smuggler, not a murderer. You're twisting this to punish me. Kev's expression hardened. If you can prove your innocence, you'll be free to go. He gestured to the papers. You have 7 days to bring me evidence, signed statements, alibis, lab tests. If you fail, I'll hand everything to Lewis and to the police. Mackenzie swallowed, knuckles digging into his arms. And if it is true? If one of us did kill Adam Barton? Kev's eyes glistened. Then Lewis deserves justice. And this valley deserves to know its sin. Aaron's shoulders slumped. We can't fix the past. But we can do what's right now. John's jaw worked. I'll reopen the case. I'll use every resource Hot 10 and Dewsbury can offer. Robert nodded, face grim. I'll be checking the courier logs, bank statements, anything to show I wasn't there. Mackenzie squared his shoulders. I'll get character witnesses, people who saw me at the barn rehearsals that night. Aaron exhaled slowly. I'll talk to Diane, and to the others I ran from, and ask for help sorting this out. Kev lowered the lantern until his face was lost in darkness. Then, just as silently as he'd come, he slipped back through the broken wall, vanishing into the night. Over the next week, Emmerdale stirred with mounting anxiety. News of Kev's ultimatum rippled through the village, either by overheard fragments in the woolpack, or by furtive side glances at Butler's farm and home farm. Lewis Barton, unaware of the men's struggle, continued his work in the fields, oblivious to the reckoning gathering like storm clouds on the horizon. Robert spent daylight hours crisscrossing home farm's accounts, rallying old allies for support. He met in secret with Amelia Spencer, his former partner in mischief, and together they scoured the archives of courier shipments to verify his absence on the night in question. At night, he lay awake, haunted by the memory of the murmured curse he'd uttered when Adam Barton had fallen silent beneath the water. Even if he hadn't killed the man, his father's sins had stained him. Mackenzie and Aaron moved as a pair, visiting the drama troupe where Mackenzie had been rehearsing lines with Ed McAllister, who confirmed his presence, and tracking down Diane Dingle's testimony, coaxing her to sign her original witness statement under oath, and poring over the village newspaper from that month, hunting any overlooked clue. The tension between them deepened their bond. They were united by a secret no one else could share. John McBain, reactivated as an investigator, found himself, despite his professional instincts, torn between loyalty to his friends and duty to truth. He called in old colleagues, fingerprint analysts, coroner's reports, and through careful questioning, he discovered that the original file had been tampered with, pages removed, evidence misfiled. John's heart pounded as he realized someone in the local constabulary had colluded to cover up the case, perhaps a senior officer friendly with Robert's family. As the seventh day approached, the four men met beneath the old oak tree outside Butler's farm, each clutching folders stuffed with exonerating documents. They greeted one another with a mixture of relief and dread. Only Aaron dared a wry smile. Well, whoever survives this will be a very unpopular man in the village. They agreed to reconvene at midnight in the barn, to present their findings to Kev, and, they hoped, end this nightmare. Midnight came with a breath of frigid air. The barn loomed like a battered fortress. Robert arrived first, followed by Mackenzie, then Aaron, then John. Their footsteps echoed inside. But when they reached the lantern spot, Kev was nowhere to be seen. Confusion flared among them. Had he seen their evidence and fled? Or was this another of his psychological games? Before they could speak, a door at the far end creaked open. Lewis Barton stepped into the glow, his features pale but resolute. In his hand he held the battered coroner's report, scanned and reprinted. "I found the missing pages," he said quietly. "And I found a list of names, yours among them." He turned to each man. "I deserved to hear this from you." Then, with a tremor in his voice, he added, "I need to know who killed my father." The four friends turned to him, guilt and fear colliding. Robert swallowed. "Lewis." "I." Mackenzie touched Aaron's arm. Aaron simply bowed his head. John's hand closed on Robert's shoulder. "We'll tell you everything," he said. "But we need you to trust us." Lewis's eyes flickered with anguish. "I want justice," he said. "But I need the truth." Kev emerged then from behind a pile of old bales, lantern in hand, watching them with a sober expression. "This is precisely why I called you here," he said. "Not to condemn you, but to offer you the chance to set things right." Robert stepped forward, handing Kev the stack of documents he'd compiled. "I wasn't there that night," he said. "My car was locked away. My courier logs prove it. But I'll help you find who was." Mackenzie and Aaron placed Diane's sworn statement and Ed's rehearsal schedule beside Robert's papers. John produced the coroner's file showing tampering. Then they stood back. Kev studied the evidence, fingers stroking his chin. The lantern flickered, but he said nothing for a long moment. Finally he looked up at Lewis. "The man who killed Adam Barton was Rory Hughes," he announced. Lewis's face registered shock. Rory had been the gang leader, an older boy whom Kev and the others had once idolized. Rory had vanished years ago, skirting the law and rumors of darker crimes. "Rory Hughes, gone without a trace," Lewis whispered. Kev nodded. "Rory's alive, and he intends to finish what he started. He framed you all to keep the truth buried." He turned back to the four men. "This ends now. We find him, we bring him to justice, and we cleanse this valley of the past." As dawn threatened the horizon with pale light, the 5 men and one determined young farmer sealed an uneasy pact. They would pool their resources, Robert's contacts, John's investigative prowess, Mackenzie's local knowledge, Aaron's tenacity, Lewis's moral clarity, and Kev's dogged purpose. Together, they would hunt Rory Hughes wherever he hid, and deliver him into the hands of the law before he could strike again. In the hush before sunrise, their breath rose in white clouds. Emmerdale, nestled beneath its rolling hills, seemed to exhale with them, ready to reveal its deepest secrets, and to test whether a community could rise above the sins of its fathers. And high on the ridgeline, a lone raven called out, as if heralding the reckoning to come.